First of all, I would like you please to forgive me for the poor quality of the video. I'm self-shooting in a way. At the beginning, I would like to explain a few things for those of you who haven't really known much about Egypt. But many does know that all the pyramids have had attached to them a temple at the top of the hill, at the same level of the pyramid, called mortuary temple, and another one at the bottom of the valley, of the hill, at the valley, called the valey temple. We came to discover that each pyramid had a causeway linking these two temples together. Some of them went up by 750 meters, like in the case of Unas pyramid. These causeways, all we know about them, of their use, is that they were used for ceremonies of mortuary nature, like the day the king was buried, which is, of course, as you know, 70 days after the death. Within the 70 days, they would practice, mummification and final preparations for the furnishing and the furbishing of the tomb. But there is a fact that ancient Egyptians would not make such an effort of building out of very heavy stones that long causeway for a simple reason. They were using simple method, yes, but for very good causes, and usually multiple causes. Just to give you an example, when they made their statues, they wanted to achieve better look for the statue, actually perfect look of the statue. So to accomplish this, they had to be realistic in the simplest way. This is why they had the statues grab something in their fist, in their hand, while fisted. When they did that, they had the muscles showing much more firm and much better looking of the muscles of the arms, as well as having a square shoulder in this case, shoulders. And also, it served the purpose of being too close to the body so that they are connected together, the body and the arms, avoiding the breaking of the statue. The best example of broken statues because of spread arms or legs or whatever are the Greco-Roman period. Anyway, so getting back to the causeway, the ancient Egyptians have had the causeway built up to the mortuary temple next to the pyramid from the valley for, as we said, certain religious purposes. This is how much we know about it. But taking a few steps backwards and thinking again, if it was just for ceremonial purposes, why would the son of Cheops, the owner of the biggest pyramid at the pyramid, why wouldn't he use his father's causeway connecting his pyramid or his mortuary temple to his father's causeway, which will make the distance much shorter? And then the grandson, why wouldn't he do that if it was, it's the same religion, it's the same gods and everything? So, I personally think, this is my theory, if you don't accept it, you're more than welcome, but think about it. If ancient Egyptians are to choose to make the pyramid first, or the causeway, they were smart enough. I think they would build the causeway first, just the floor, and partially the walls, as I'll explain on the simple drawings I made for you. And there, it is a much better ground to pull the stones up the hill than using just a few meters away from it, using sand and rubble or whatever to go up, pulling the stones. And some people made movies of them, pulling them on trunks of trees or sledges, so forth. The theory I composed together is that even when they are building the causeway itself, after laying the first piece of stone for the floor, they would pull the second piece immediately on the surface of the first one, which is much easier, if we agree that it's much easier than going over the sand, and then put or lay down the second stone, third, fourth, and all the way up to the hill. When they finish the floor, they would start on the walls, again using that floor for pulling the second stone. They would put the stones of the walls with two different levels, as I'll show you on the drawings. And then they would start pulling the stone on the causeway or on the floor of the causeway. And when the workers pulling it by ropes and the oxen or donkeys or whatever gets a bit, unable to continue, they got tired a bit, quickly the two men who would keep carrying a trunk of a tree or a piece of log, they would put it before the high level stones like a brake to stop the stone from sliding back down to the valley, so that the workers can rest. And then when they're ready again to pull, they would pull it, and then the log brake would be carried further, so that whenever they want to stop, of course there is always a leader in Egyptian workers. When he says stop, the men would put the log of the tree with the first higher stone to break. Now, if we take that one step further, the stones would be quarried from wherever, Aswan or Tura Mountains or wherever. They would be carried in order to take them over to the other side of the valley, where the port is for the valley temple. They would be carried on rafts, and usually they would put the raft where they expect the flood to surely come, and then they would put the stones on the rafts, so that when the flood comes, if it carries, fine, because sometimes they quarried very big stones, like for the burial chamber of King Cheops. Some of them goes up to 20-some tons apiece. And by the way, that ceiling, if you look at any site on the internet, consists of big slabs of stones, but one dimension of its sides is too narrow. And that is, of course, to explain to you that they wanted to use the causeway, because why making it that narrow on one side of it unless they want to go through a certain causeway or something. Now, I will go up to the drawings, but I want to remind you that it is not very intelligent to go outside the causeway and start pulling stones while you have it, or at least you are planning to have one. So have that first, and then pull the stones over it. When the flood comes, usually, always, it would bring thick layers of silt or mud or clay, name it as you like, which they could have used by carrying it very wet, very soft, in jars or whatever, up to the top of the causeway, where some of the workers would start pouring it down on the causeway to facilitate the pulling of the stones. Because in this case, it would be very slippery in the causeway, and the stones would have no resistance against each other, which make it much easier to pull up. And as we know, they have a brake to stop it from, sliding back. While the workers pulling the ropes would be walking outside the causeway where it's dry and sandy. I don't know if they use clay or they grind it, the limestone, or bring, while quarrying limestone, usually you grind a lot of it to cut a piece. They would collect that grinded limestone like a powder and then add water to it, clear water, and use it, not the clay, the limestone brine or whatever you call it. They would use it, pouring it at the top of the causeway to make the sliding easier and yet without causing darker color for the stone, which the clay might do. But even if the clay does make the stone on one side of it very dark, still, as we know, they did not cut the stones finally until they are actually there where they are going to really put it. So they could have cleared that dark part. And of course, at the core of the pyramid, they wouldn't really mind how the color of the surface of the stone will be, because there will be tons of stones on top of it that will hide it. Anyway, if we look at the drawings, and now you're going to rest from me, you'll just see my hand and a pen. Now, if this is the valley right here, excuse my drawing, this is why I prepared some ruler-made drawings. This is the valley where the stones arrive, and this is the slope of the grounds here. If you go straight with that, this is the ground. If they go straight with the same angle, they will miss the area right here where they will build the mortuary temple. And if I was them, instead of the ramps that so many people believe that the ancient Egyptians have made ramps around the pyramid of sand and rubble, I don't know, it's not working, they would make the ramps up for higher levels around the pyramid until they reach the top of it by a ramp. Okay? That means they have to pile up a mountain of sand and rubble to achieve the ramp, because this ramp can never be too narrow. And I mean, it has to go like 15 meters wide to be able to turn with the stones of the mortuary temple in the angle at the corner, to take the turn with the stone that is about 10 meters long, granite. You need to have very solid grounds and very wide at the corner to make the turn, because remember, there is another maybe 30 meters of rope that men are pulling. It's a heavy stone. So we are talking about 50 meters long stone. You can't turn the corner on a 10 meters wide ramp. So you have to really make a humongous hill of sand around the pyramid to achieve that. So I think instead of going around the pyramid, they would go straight at the same angle of the causeway, and they can achieve that while building layer by layer of stones. I know this is too small, I need another thing to show it. They would start putting stones at the level where they want to reach the pyramid. And in this case, it's going to be the same thing as the causeway. They would use the same technique. So what you need then is just one side of the pyramid about 20 meters wide, because you will always go straight and then take your turns at the level where you reach. So they would start adding stones to continue with the same angle up till they reach the top. And these stones that they add here in this area could very well be used for the mortuary temple that they would build right here. Let me use another pen. That they would start building right here. This is where the mortuary temple will take place. And these stones can make a big temple, of course, and there are other minor pyramids that they will use for the wives. I'm sure you've seen pictures of them, that they can also use all these stones for building it. Now, getting back to explain to you, if my explanation is poor and you cannot really understand what I meant with the previous explanation, now, this is what I mentioned about the walls of the causeway. That's the ground level of the causeway where the pavement is, where they already would put the stones. And this is the difference of height, so that they can pull a stone, and then when they want to stop, for example here, that tree log would be a break going across from one side to the other. That drawing might explain it a bit more. This is the stone they are taking up, and that is where they would put the break, the trunk of a tree or something, across, so that the stone would not slide back. And from the top, the workers would start pouring either clay or grinded limestone mixed with water, and then many stones can be on the way, because the people and the donkeys will be actually in a wide space around the causeway. Sorry, this is like a bird's eye. This is, if you look at it from above, that's the causeway track. These are the higher stones. These are the lower stones. Okay? So when the stone is going up, I mean the buildings, the construction stone, is going up the causeway, and the clay is being poured from here, it will find it very easy to slide. The men outside here in the dry areas with the leaders, excuse my drawings, they look like ants too, I'm sure, but animals and people pulling the rope can do that from the outside, on both sides, and as many as you like. And if they want to stop for a break, as we explained, they would put the break across, right before the high stones. The dark ones are the high stones. Excuse my drawings. So you can see here, if you put a trunk of a tree, finished. This stone can stay there forever, if you want. But they only do that until they can take a rest, and then they start pulling again, and two men would take the break or the trunk further up. So if they want to stop here, they can do that. If they want to stop here, they can do that. Actually, every meter, 2 meters maybe, they can take a break. Now, finally, hope this can be explaining. This theory of mine depends on two facts. Ancient Egyptians want usually to achieve very complex achievements, almost impossible for anyone else to achieve, in the simplest way. And the theory that they used slaves is also very, very weak. Actually, at the time the pyramids were built, because I'm sure you know that they stopped building pyramids when they discovered that tomb robbers can easily find where the tomb is with a pyramid around it. But they did use Egyptians, because there was no war prisoners. And if you're thinking of one of the big pyramids, like the Great Pyramid at Giza or the one of Senefru or whomever, then we are talking about almost every working man in Egypt has to take part in it. It's a humongous achievement. And these workers, the rest of the year, will be the ones whom are cultivating the land, the ones who will build like dams around temples or palaces or villages to avoid the flood or to protect it from the flood. These men are the ones that will build the storage for the food, I mean for the grain they use for all the year. So you cannot just waste people by slaving them and beating them to death to build your pyramid. These are your working power, and there is a pyramid for the prince. I mean, even if the father wants to kill the people to build his pyramid, he will find his son very upset because, as an heir, or as he will inherit the throne and becoming a king, he will want a pyramid for himself as well. And actually, even in building tombs or cutting tombs in the mountains where you needed less people, but actually you need very clever people, because 4,500, or in the Valley of the Kings, for example, 3,200 years ago, if you are cutting a tomb in the hill, you don't want it to collapse on you when you're dead even in there. So you want workers who knows the sound of the chisel when they hammer it, that this stone is good for cutting. Otherwise, it will collapse. They will not be able to achieve it. And if they kill them to hide where the tomb is, as some stupid theories are saying, then who else? You would have one tomb finished, because the clever men who can make such art and such achievement, you're going to kill them. Okay, let's say once you do that, twice, 3 times, 4 times, not for hundreds of years. Where will you bring people from? Clever ones, artistic ones. So I think it is quite insane to think that they were killing people, and during their life and during their time, they were guarding it. And they did put it in a place where, very difficult to reach. And then they covered the entrance to disguise it from bad people. They covered it by layers of rubble and stones and everything, that actually you need, a team of maybe hundreds of men to be able to dig, to get things out. So people going out to the desert in hundreds of numbers would, attract the attention of anyone. He doesn't really need to guard. He just sits on the west bank. If there is a group of people walking out to the desert with tools and things to take this trouble away, all he has to do is to capture them. Anyway, I hope you believe my theory, and if you don't, I'm sorry I wasted your time. Thank you. Bye for now.